Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green are considered easy games to Nuzlocke. They are simple and give you access to a ton of great Pokemon. This means that a hardcore Nuzlocke challenge where any Pokemon that faints is dead forever, and you can only catch one Pokemon per new area is relatively easy to beat. Heck, you could even beat Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green with hardcore Nuzlocke rules with specific types. Except, there's one type that seems impossible. The Fire type. The Fire type is one of my favorite types, but by only using this type, we run into some issues. First, they simply aren't that good into Kanto. On the surface, we only have one Fire type with a secondary typing being Charizard. It also doesn't help that we can only use Charmander and later Charmeleon in the first two gym fights. The first two gym fights are Rock and Water respectively, which are super effective against Fire types. Even if we get past these fights, we don't get any new encounters until after 3 gym badges. With a ton of mandatory trainers, we go over the level cap. However, that's an issue for later because we have a bigger problem: the lack of documentation. I did not plan on doing this run initially because I thought it was impossible. There are 3 videos and 1 Reddit thread on the run, but they basically all say the same thing. This run is impossible. The first video is basically a longer version of what I said earlier. Even if you get past Brock and Misty, you will go over the level cap. The second video is a bit different. It was made by Hale Garchomp, and while he did technically beat the run, he used a bunch of save states which are illegal in hardcore Nuzlocks. The third video breaks the rules by giving the player access to hidden power, which is not possible in the vanilla game. There is also a Reddit thread that breaks rules by giving earlier items and the EXP share to avoid the level cap issue. Even if these people did beat the challenge, they had accommodations and could not do it in a vanilla game. But around a few months ago, I found a video that wasn't even related to Fire Red and Leaf Green that makes this run possible. That video is Keeper Plays Steel-type Hardcore Nuzlocke Challenge in Pokemon Emerald. This run was designated impossible in a vanilla game. However, Keeper got around this by using gift events, which is allowed in hardcore Nuzlocke rules, as long as you get 1 encounter per Pokemarket. This inspired me to do some research where I learned about the Gather More Pokemon event list. In the list we can get an Arcanine, which is only found in Fire Red, as well as a Houndour in addition to both the Johto and Hoenn starters. This makes this run possible. Well, somewhat. This means I was all set to beat Pokemon Leaf Green with only Fire starters. Our first step in this challenge is to pick up a starter, with our clear choice being Charmander. I don't use Charmander often, but Charizard is a great Pokemon, and Game Freak seems to agree with me. This does give our rival Water, Squirtle, and later Blastoise, but this isn't a huge deal because his best water move will be Water Gun with only 40 HP. However, it could get a little bit scary towards the end of the game. For now, however, he's not a huge deal. Before we can face the first gym leader Brock, we can already get 2 Pokemon from the Viridian and Pewter City Pokemon Centers, being Cyndaquil and Torchic. These are great Pokemon, and even though they won't obey for a few level caps, they are still great EXP sponges. Right off the bat, I'm ready to face Brock, the first gym leader. He uses rock types and has a reputation of being pretty easy. However, in this case we only have fire types, which are weak to rock types. Fortunately, by the grace of Arceus, Kai the Charmander has Metal Claw, which hits super effectively and gets an attack boost. However, this also means the battle is completely dependent on the number of attack boosts we get from Metal Claw. On attempt 1, Brock leads off with Geodude and I with Kai. Geodude fortunately doesn't know any rock type moves, so after hitting a Metal Claw, Geodude responds with a weak tackle. On the following turn, Metal Claw is just shy of the KO, but all Geodude does is set up a Harden, raising its defense. Following turn, we can KO Geodude with another Metal Claw, which brings in Brock's ace, Onix. This is pretty bad. We have no attack boost, so even though we gain an extra level, we simply don't have enough attack. Fortunately, on turn 1, Onix goes for a bind, so Metal Claw hits for a bit of damage. Luckily for us, Onix is kind of an awful Pokemon and goes for a weak tackle, as Metal Claw brings Onix into the yellow HP range. Unfortunately, it's all over. We're low enough so that Onix sees the KO with a Rock Tomb. Since Onix outspeeds, he can go for a Rock Tomb, destroying Kai's life and ending the run. While I do have 2 Pokemon left, Onix walls our entire team, so there's nothing we can do. Let's try again. On attempt 2, something interesting happens. Brock leads off with Geodude and I with Kai. A Metal Claw does a decent chunk of damage, but I get the attack boost this time. This is great because while Geodude can hit me with a tackle, my Metal Claw on the following turn does a ton of damage, but is just shy of the KO. I do get another attack boost, however, which is nice, and Geodude just goes for a defense curl, so we won't take extra damage. This means we can then take Geodude out on the following turn as Onix takes the field, but we are in a much better position being at +2 attack. After tanking a weak tackle, Metal Claw is a 2-shot, and just in case my next Metal Claw low rolls, we get a 3rd attack boost. Onix, sensing the fight is over, just goes for a bind, meaning a +3 Metal Claw destroys him, winning me the battle and the first gym badge. Immediately after this, all of my starters evolve into their second stage form, and they are definitely all uglier. I can also get my next encounter from the Cerulean City Pokemon Center, being a Houndour from the Gather More Pokemon event. While he won't be useful now, he will be phenomenal later. He also has Thief to get held items from wild Pokemon, which will be invaluable. With that, it's off to Cerulean City, where I can take on the second gym leader, Misty. Like Brock, this is going to be nearly impossible. The only Pokemon I have that can do meaningful damage is Kai with Mega Kick. Starmie and Staryu have Water Pulse, which should almost always KO us, which makes this fight super difficult. The only plan is to hope for Mega Punch to do massive damage. We also have Smokescreen to lower the opposing Pokemon's attack. That's basically it. We don't have access to good TMs and items, so I have no choice but to charge head first. On attempt 2, I test the waters. No pun intended. Misty leads off with Staryu, and I with Wildfire. Starmie goes for a Harden on turn number 1, and I forgot this is an event Pokemon which won't obey at this point in the game. Still, we manage to land a Peck for a bit of damage. Starmie then gets off a Water Pulse and Confusion proc as I hurt myself in Confusion. Needing Wildfire for later, I switch into Pyro, who almost dies on a Water Pulse. Unfortunately, it's time for a sack, and poor Pyro can't even stand a Water Pulse before he goes down. RIP. Kai comes in to take the Water Pulse for a bit of damage before going for a Smokescreen, lowering Starmie's accuracy. After tanking a Water Pulse, I go for a Metal Claw, hoping for an attack boost, but unfortunately no dice. This means we need another sacrifice, and it has to be Kai. He's simply outsped and destroyed by a tackle. With my back against the wall, I bring Ray out, who refuses to listen to me as Starmie heals itself with Recover. Ray is able to get off a quick attack as Starmie then just goes for a Harden. Ray then doesn't obey, allowing Starmie to get to +3 defense via Harden. Ray then doesn't obey me again, and then takes more than half from Water Pulse, which is a huge issue. And then, for the third time, Ray doesn't notice, and him not noticing gets him killed by a Water Pulse. I don't even bother to bring in Wildfire, and that ends attempt 2. Honestly, I was just messing around. I didn't think this run was possible, but after not being able to defeat Starmie, I knew I had to do this. On attempt 3, I lead off with Kai, and Misty leads off with Starmie. The plan is to get Starmie to -6 accuracy with Smokescreen, and then KO with Mega Kick. We are able to get off 3 Smokescreens as Starmie then goes for a Water Pulse. However, we are able to get off a Mega Punch, which only does a bit of damage thanks to Harden. We can fortunately avoid some attacks thanks to the accuracy drops and pick up the KO with 2 more Mega Punches, bringing out the terrifying Starmie. Unfortunately, this thing just outspeeds and KOs Charmander with a Water Pulse. The hope was that Staryu would always miss all its moves, and as Starmie came in, we would be at full HP. We would then tank a move and go for a Smokescreen, but oh well. On attempt 5, we KO Staryu as Starmie comes in and outspeeds it a hard Water Pulse before we can get off a Smokescreen. And then on the following turn, Water Pulse just crits, but you get the idea. It's definitely possible. Just gonna take a lot of luck. Unfortunately, the odds of winning this fight are just so low. Like, I probably have a better chance of being president than this, or winning the lottery. Either way, after attempt 10, I decided to switch things up a bit and train Kai in attack, which in hindsight was not the correct decision, as you'll see later. Anyway, by waiting for a timid plus attack nature and giving Kai a ton of attack EVs, I train him to the max in attack, or the max I can at this point in the game. Unfortunately, it takes 15 attempts to get back to Misty because I have a ton of losses to Brock, which suck. Honestly, at this point, it's just a sitting game. I filmed this video about a month ago, and I still have flashbacks from this challenge. This was honestly the most annoying thing I've ever had to do for this channel. It's just a cycle of going for Smokescreen and praying for Starmie to miss, only for a move to connect and my heart to drop when he does. I never thought in a million years that Vanilla Fire Red and Leaf Green could be so hard, but here we are. I never thought a single Pokemon would ever give me this much of an issue, but it does. I remember spending 5 hours on a random Sunday. What started off as a fun challenge became incredibly annoying pretty quickly. I wouldn't even see Starmie again until after 110 attempts. All I can do is hope to see the Starmie again. At this point, with 130 attempts, it's clear it's not working again and I need to change the formula up a bit. Instead of training for useless attack EVs and IVs, I train for speed. This is so that we always outspeed Starmie and can go for a Smokescreen before it attacks. On attempt 30, we KO Staryu with just 4 HP to spare and outspeed to go for a Smokescreen as they miss a Rapid Spin. Sadly, Water Pulse then takes us out, but it gives me hope. Something I didn't realize while doing these attempts is that I'm making this fight way more RNG dependent than it needs to be. I didn't notice this at the time, but Starmie never sees the KO for Water Pulse, so it always goes for Harden on the first turn most of the time. This means we can KO with 2 Mega Punches and we don't have to worry about Water Pulse and being outsped. Instead of dragging the fight out, we can just hit 2 Mega Punches which don't have the best accuracy, but it gives us the best chance of having full HP when dealing with the Starmie. On attempt 140, we try this. Though Misty heals at this point, we outspeed and pick up the KO, bringing in Starmie. We fortunately have full HP, which gives us the best chance of dealing with this thing. We go for a Smokescreen as Starmie then misses a Water Pulse. Unfortunately, Fate hands us a bad card as we hit a Smokescreen and then Starmie connects with a Water Pulse and gets the confusion. We then hit ourselves as Water Pulse KOs us. Brutal, but at least this attempt shows that it's possible. Unfortunately, it's still a handful of attempts before this happens. The RNG gods aren't in our favor until attempt 170 happens. I stare at Misty leading off with Staryu for like the 10th hour in a row as Kai comes in. We outspeed and inflict massive damage with a Mega Punch as Starmie predictably goes for a Harden. The Harden doesn't matter because we pick up the KO on the following turn, which brings out Starmie. The strategy is to go for Smokescreen and pray for misses. I get off 2 Smokescreens before Starmie connects with a Water Pulse, doing a ton of damage. I then hit a Mega Punch for a bit of damage on the following turn as Starmie then misses a Water Pulse. Once again on the following turn, Starmie misses another Water Pulse. This means I can go for a 3rd Mega Punch which crits to KO Starmie, winning me the battle and the 2nd gym badge completely deathless. It was about 12:30 when I beat this gym, and this might have been the happiest I've ever felt doing a run for this channel. Honestly, words can't describe it, you just have to experience it. Anyway, I'm sure you're sick of seeing Misty, and so am I. After 4 pages of script, we can finally move on. As a reward, I can get my next encounter being a Houndour. I forgot to get him before Misty this time, but it's not like he would have been that useful anyway. Normally the run would end here since you only have access to Kai and therefore would go over the level cap, but we have 3 other Pokemon to soak EXP. Before I can get to Lieutenant Surge, we already have another roadblock being Water and his Squirtle. Fortunately, he's not fully evolved, and even with the level advantage, this is still going to be an uphill battle. Water leads off with Pidgeotto, who after a lucky burn proc is taken out by a couple of embers from Ray. This brings in Squirtle, who I leer with Ray, and then swap to Wildfire, who's able to do some damage with double kicks before eating a Water Gun. This means I just have to switch to Kai on a Water Gun. I then go for a Mega Punch for a bit of damage before eating a Water Gun once more. This means I can pick up the KO on the following turn with a final punch which causes Water to bring in Abra. Abra only has teleport, so it can't even touch us. A single Metal Claw destroys it, leaving just Rattata. After hitting a weak quick attack, it goes down to a single Ember, winning me the battle. After a handful of random trainer battles, I make it to Bill's house, who's into some weird and quite frankly messed up stuff. He'll be important for later. However, Bill gives me the SSN ticket, which is a gateway to another rival fight. This time we have to face Wartortle, and we don't have any wiggle room thanks to the level cap. As Bud leads off with Pidgeotto, I lead off with Ray the Quilava. I then go for a Leer to get the bird's defense low, as Ray then gets his accuracy lowered with a Sand Attack. After Pidgeot then goes for a weak quick attack, I get the bird to -2 defense with a Leer. We then miss a quick attack thanks to the Sand Attack from earlier before Pidgeot copies us but actually lands his quick attack. Fortunately, on the next turn, Ray lands a quick attack, which unfortunately does less than half, as Pidgeot then goes for another quick attack. Because of the accuracy drop, I don't want to keep missing moves, so I swap into Kai on a Gust for a bit of damage. After tanking another quick attack, we go for an Ember, which is just shy of the KO. On the next turn, Water then does something surprising and switches to Wartortle. Wartortle doesn't really take that much damage from a crit, but we do get a burn, which is nice. The burn actually isn't as good as you think it is because all water moves are special, but he will take passive damage each turn. I then connect with a Mega Punch on the following turn, which is just shy of the KO as Water Gun leaves me with just 9 HP. With burn damage, the turtle's left in the red, and then I foolishly go for a Mega Punch which does connect to KO the bulky turtle. I say foolishly because if that missed, we would have been back to square one. This brings in Pidgeotto, and since we're exactly at the level cap, I have to swap and end up switching to Ray on a Gust, leaving him in the yellow. Fortunately, that doesn't matter because on the next turn, Ember picks up the KO, which brings in Water's Raticate. Since we are low, I swap to Wildfire on a moderately hard Hyper Fang. After taking another Fang on the following turn, which luckily doesn't crit, a set of double kicks to the Radin, leaving the Psychic-type Pokemon Kadabra. Since we are part Fighting type, I need to swap. I send in Pyro, the Dark type, who is the perfect counter to this thing because he doesn't take damage from Psychic moves. Kadabra is a bit annoying with Kinesis lowering my accuracy as well as Disable, so it does take a while, but a few thieves pick up the KO, winning me the battle. After rubbing the captain's back, which I'm pretty sure is illegal, it's off to face Surge and his electric types. This is a relatively tame fight compared to the last couple of gym fights, however. His Raichu can be a bit annoying, but we have 4 Pokemon to fight it, so I'm not too worried. Surge leads off with Voltorb and I with Ray. I did not mean to lead with Ray and I wanted to lead with Kai, but oh well. After tanking a Sonic Boom, an Ember does a decent chunk of damage thanks to Blaze. Since we are super low, I switch into Kai on a Shockwave. Fortunately, thanks to these speed EVs, we can outspeed and go for a Dig. On the following turn, we re-emerge for the KO, which brings out Surge's next Pokemon, a Pikachu. Once again, it's the same process. We outspeed thanks to the EV investment and go underground for a Dig. On the following turn, we then pick up the KO, which just leaves Surge's final Pokemon being the terrifying Raichu. Once again, it's the same process. We go underground for a Dig, but unfortunately Raichu annoyingly sets up a double team, raising its evasion. We do fortunately connect, doing a ton of damage before we get paralyzed by a Thunder Wave. Since we have 3 Pokemon and Raichu can't do a ton of damage, I decide to risk it. On the next turn, Kai goes underground for a Dig after eating a hard Shockwave from this thing. This means that on the following turn, through paralysis and double team, we can get the KO with a Dig, winning me the 3rd gym badge of the playthrough. I was honestly surprised as to how easy that was. Sure, if Kai got paralyzed, we would have been in a bit of trouble, but we would have had enough Pokemon to pick up the KO eventually. With that, I go through Rock Tunnel, which you'd expect to be a huge challenge with all the rock types. Dig Charmander and a fighting typing Combuskin, so it wasn't super hard. With that, I make it to Lavender Town, where I can get my next encounter on the adjacent route, being a Vulpix named Heat Blast. Vulpix is a pretty decent Pokemon that I can evolve right away thanks to a Firestone in the Celadon department store. In Celadon City, I can also pick up a random Eevee in the Trainer School. I can do the same thing I did with Vulpix and use a Firestone to evolve him into a Flareon, giving me a full team of 6 for the first time in the playthrough. This gym is great. It's full of women. Alright, who let this slide? Anyway, the next gym leader is Erica and her grass types, which as you would expect aren't a huge deal. Against the lead Victory Bell, I bring in Heat Blast for his debut battle, who immediately gets the KO with a Flamethrower from the game corner. This brings in Tangela, and even with no EV investment, we manage to get the KO immediately. Last is Vileplume, who manages to live a Flamethrower in the red and paralyzes me with a Stun Spore. Erica then heals up and I get fully paralyzed, but it doesn't really matter because a few Flamethrowers from there pick up the KO and win me the 4th gym badge. Thank you Game Freak for finally giving me a break. With the huge level cap increase, I can evolve all my starter Pokemon into their final forms, and man, I gotta say, these are some cool designs. For the comment question, tell me your favorite starter Pokemon down in the comments. While you're down there, you might as well subscribe for daily Pokemon content. After this, we have a fight with Giovanni, the head of Team Rocket. Normally I'd skip this fight, but he has 2 rock types because Game Freak decides the break is over. Giovanni leads off with Onix and I with Kai. We outspeed and go underground for a Dig like we have been doing, and on the following turn we're able to bring Onix deep in the yellow. Onix then retaliates with a Rage for a whopping 3 HP because this thing has a horrible attack stat. This means we can go underground once more and pick up the KO on the following turn, taking out the Rock Snake. This brings out Rhyhorn, so it's the same thing. We outspeed and go underground for a Dig and then re-emerge on the following turn, doing more than half. This time for whatever reason Rhyhorn just goes for a Scary Face. This does lower my speed, but it doesn't matter because Rhyhorn is slow as dirt and we can outspeed and get the KO with another Dig, leaving just Kangaskhan. Kangaskhan is a pretty bulky Pokemon, but I'm not too worried. After taking a weak bite, a Flamethrower does a decent amount of damage. Strangely, the AI on the following turn just goes for a Toe Up, which does lower my defense. However, it doesn't matter because Flamethrower is more than enough to do Kangaskhan in, winning me the battle against Giovanni. This immediately brings me to another rival fight against Water and his Wartortle because Game Freak hates us. Fortunately, we have a massive level advantage here. Against lead Pidgeotto, we outspeed and KO with a single super effective Flamethrower. Second is Wartortle, who we outspeed and KO with a critical hit Wing Attack. Third is Growlithe, who with Intimidate actually survives on a sliver of HP from Dig, but just goes for a weak Ember. This means another Metal Claw picks up the KO. Fourth is his eggs, which go down to a single Flamethrower, and Kadabra goes down to a single Wing Attack. Game Freak thought they could screw us over, but they couldn't. Even the Fishermen on the way stand no chance, but somebody who does stand a chance is Koga and his Poison types. We match his Poison types neutrally, but Minimize, Toxic, and Explosion are all super annoying. Koga leads off with Coughing, and I with Ray. We outspeed and go for a Flamethrower for the instant KO thanks to a lucky critical hit. We are really off to a great start. Second is the annoying Muck, who takes a Flamethrower and goes for a Minimize. Great. On the following turn we connect with a Flamethrower, leaving Muck barely alive before eating a Sludge. Luckily we don't get poisoned. On the following turn Koga burns through a potion and I go for a Smoke Screen to lower this thing's accuracy. From there we trade off attacks with me going for Flamethrower and Quick Attack and him going for Sludge. Eventually Muck is able to get a poison with Sludge, so I have to swap out. I send in Kai on a Sludge. We then outspeed and go underground for a Dig, which then picks up the KO on the following turn. Third is Coughing, who is so weak that even a single flamethrower, even from full HP, is enough for the instant one-shot. Fourth is Wheezing, who we just outspeed and KO with a flamethrower, winning me the battle. This wins me my 5th gym badge, and we're deathless. Of course, immediately right after the battle, we have another rival fight. This time we have to go head to head with Blastoise. Water leads off with Pidgeot and I with Heat Blast. Heat Blast is HP Electric, which hits for a bit and then tanks a weak Quick Attack. On the following turn we get a critical hit Hidden Power, taking the bird out, which causes Water to send in Blastoise. For whatever reason, Blastoise just goes for a Protect instead of attacking, which just burns through one of my Hidden Power PP. Then on the following turn, Hidden Power connects for a bit of damage as Water Gun brings Heat Blast deep in the yellow. I have to switch, so I send in Kai, but all Blastoise does is go for another Protect. I have no idea what's wrong with the AI in the game. Wing Attack on the following turn then does a bit of damage, as Blastoise Water Gun doesn't do that much damage in return. Blastoise then wastes time going for 2 consecutive Protects in a row. This is pretty annoying, and I have no idea why the AI is doing this. Fortunately, Blastoise gets his act together and goes for a Water Gun, doing a bit of damage. Ultimately, we prevail and pick up the KO with 2 Wing Attacks, taking out Blastoise. Third out is Growlithe, and since I am low, I switch to Ray on the incoming takedown. Since we don't have great moves into this thing, I go for a Smokescreen, which immediately pays off as Growlithe misses his takedown. I then Smokescreen once more before eating a weak takedown on the next turn. From there we start trading attacks, and thanks to the accuracy drops, I can best the little pupper and pick up the KO. This brings in the pile of eggs, which go down to a single flamethrower. Last out is Alakazam, who can't stand a bite from a fully evolved Pyro, so that wins me the battle. This brings me to the second Giovanni fight, and he has 2 rock types, so this is going to be somewhat hard. He leads off with Nidorino, and I with Wildfire for our first battle as a fully evolved Blaziken. On the first turn we go for a bulk up, raising our attack and defense stats, as Nidoqueen just goes for a weak Fury attack. On the following turn, a flamethrower is enough for the clean one shot, which brings in Nidorino. Even at +1 attack, Slash only does a bit of damage, as Body Slam does massive damage in return. Even on the following turn, Nidorino is bulky enough that a flamethrower does not KO. However, all Nidorino does is go for a Poison Sting for a massive 7 HP. This means on the next turn we can outspeed and pick up the KO with another flamethrower. This brings in Giovanni's next Pokemon, a Kangaskhan. Thanks to the bulk ups, we can go for a set of double kicks, doing a ton of damage and are enough for the KO. Last is Rhyhorn, but like Kangaskhan, he too goes down to a set of double kicks, winning me the battle. It's really lucky that we get a great setup move, otherwise I had no clue what else I'd do. From here we can challenge the next gym leader, being Sabrina, and our psychic types for the 6th gym badge. However, this is a pretty easy battle as all of her Pokemon are walled by Pyro. Against the lead Kadabra, 1 Feint Attack from Pyro is enough to destroy the Psychic type. Her second Pokemon, Mr. Mime, follows suit and goes down to a single Feint Attack. Third is Venomoth, who's not actually a Psychic type, it's a Flying and Bug type. Therefore, it doesn't take super effective damage from Feint Attack, so we have to use Flamethrower, which is enough for the one-shot. Last is Alakazam, who's actually able to outspeed and go for a Calm Mind. This is scary on paper until you realize a single Feint Attack is enough for the KO, winning me the battle. You have to remember that there are no Dark types in Kanto, so the game isn't really designed around them. With that, it's an immediate shot to the next gym leader, Blaine, and his fire types for the mirror match. Fortunately, I have a play here. Blaine leads off with Growlithe, and I with Wildfire, who gets intimidated. We can remedy this by setting up a bulk up, raising our attack and defense stat to compensate as Growlithe graciously misses a Fire Blast. I then set up a second bulk up, getting the +1 attack as the pupper goes for a Fire Blast for a bit of damage. The turn then repeats itself as I set up another bulk up, getting the +2 attack, and Growlithe just goes for a weak Fire Blast. On the next turn we outspeed and go for a Dig. We then re-emerge, and thanks to the boosts, it's more than enough for the KO. Blaine then shows me Ponyta, who is not fully evolved and meets the same fate as Growlithe, going down to a singular Dig. Third is Rapidash, who is a bit more bulky than the first 2 Pokemon. However, that is not enough to save him, as he also goes down to a Dig like his fallen brethren. Last is Arcanine with Intimidate, who lowers me down to only +1 attack. Thanks to the Intimidate, a Dig on the following turn barely doesn't KO thanks to the Intimidate. Arcanine, instead of attacking, just goes for a Roar, bringing in a Ray, which I did not prepare for at all. I completely forgot about Intimidate. Fortunately, Blaine then heals up, so I go for a Smokescreen to hopefully have Arcanine miss some attacks. On the next turn, I go for a Leer, lowering this thing's defense as Fire Blast does a ton of damage despite it being resisted. We are left deep in the yellow, so I need to switch out. I decide to bring Kai, who tanks a Fire Blast better than Ray. I then go for a Dig, but Arcanine barely hangs on in the red thanks to its sheer bulk, so Kai has to tank a takedown, which luckily doesn't crit. However, the recoil damage from the takedown is enough that Blaine heals up back to full on the following turn. This does give me an opportunity, however, to go for a dig, which barely does 50%. Fortunately, all we have to do is pray that takedown doesn't crit, which it doesn't, and we can go underground again. We can then KO the pupper on the next turn with a dig, winning me the battle and the 7th gym badge. This was definitely on me though, as I miscounted the amount of bulk ups I needed to one-shot this thing. We needed 4 bulk ups as opposed to 2, but I'm glad everything worked out in the end, although that was pretty risky and stupid. With 7 badges in hand, Billy Freak from earlier approaches me and wants to take me to some random island. Does this sound familiar? Normally I'd say no because I have better things to do, however we can get 2 encounters on these Sevi Islands. The first is Ponyta from Kindle Road. This is actually a pretty decent Pokemon. I know Ponyta gets a lot of flack for being essentially a worse Arcanine, but do not sleep on this thing. The second encounter is a Magmar from Mount Ember who's going to be a key player as well, as you'll see later. I used my Master Ball on it here since it's the last Pokemon we can catch. With these new encounters in hand, we can fight the final gym leader Giovanni and his ground types, which can be scary. Fortunately, after investing some EVs, we do have a plan. Giovanni leads off with Rhyhorn and I with Monroe the Rapidash. Okay, pause. You might be wondering about the nickname theme. If you haven't caught on yet, the theme was Fire Mast. However, at this point I was running out of Fire Masters or Fire Wielders, so I named him after a real person, James Monroe. If you are not from the United States, you probably don't have any idea of who I'm talking about. Heck, even if you are from the US like me, you also probably have no idea who I'm talking about. I genuinely don't think I've ever heard someone in person say this guy's name before. I don't think I've ever disclosed this on the channel, but I'm a huge fan of American presidents and love reading about them. Anyway, if you didn't know, Monroe served as the 5th president from 1817 to 1825 and was a pretty important guy. He was a founder of the country that I am from and live in, so pretty important. Anyway, he had a disagreement with a guy named William Crawford, who was his Secretary of the Treasury. The Secretary became so angry at President James Monroe that he began whipping his cane at the president. This forced Monroe to use fireplace tongs to defend himself, and he ended up chasing Crawford. I don't know if this story is 100% confirmed, but oh well. Monroe in general is a pretty interesting guy, and I totally recommend reading about him if you're into history. Anyway, that's probably not what you're here for, so back to the video. Anyway, Monroe outspeeds and sets the sun up with a sunny day as Rhyhorn just goes for a scary face, lowering my speed. This doesn't matter, however, because Rhyhorn is slow as dirt. A single solar beam is more than enough for the clean one-shot on the following turn. Second from Giovanni is his Dug Trio, and thanks to the scary face, he is able to outspeed. Earthquake does a ton of damage, and a critical hit would have just KO'd. Fortunately, no crit comes out, so we're able to go for a 1-turn solar beam for the instant KO. Third is Nidoqueen, who doesn't take super effective damage from solar beam. Since I know Nidoqueen always sees the KO with Earthquake, I can switch to Kai, who is immune. In the sun, a flamethrower is more than enough for the one-shot. Fourth is Rhyhorn, who we can't one-shot, so I have to swap out. I decide to switch to Wildfire on a scary face, which once again doesn't matter because of this thing's speed stat. I can then go underground for a dig and re-emerge on the following turn, doing more than half of this thing's health. Rhyhorn does go for another scary face, but it doesn't matter because even at -2 speed, we are still faster. This means dig on the following turn is enough for the clean KO. This just leaves Giovanni with his last Pokemon being Nidoqueen, who is a bit scary. I start out by switching to Kai on a whiffed Earthquake thanks to our flying type. Since Nidoqueen will no longer go for Earthquake, I can switch to Torch the Magmar, who tanks Thrashes better than he tanks Earthquakes. And then with a Twisted Spoon as well as a bunch of special attack EVs, a Psychic is more than enough for the KO. This wins me the battle and the 8th and final gym badge completely deathless. Before we can challenge the Pokemon League, we have one final fight with the rival Water. Honestly, his Blastoise isn't too big of an issue with Monroe, as I can set up the sun and go for Solar Beams for a ton of damage. Blastoise does have access to Rain Dance, which he does end up using, but it doesn't really matter because we always outspeed and always win the Weather War. This means as long as we always go for Solar Beam on the turn after Blastoise goes for Rain Dance, we are always guaranteed to pick up the KO with Solar Beam. Water's other Pokemon aren't really much of a threat, so it's a straight shot to the Pokemon League. With 5 final fights left in the game. The Elite Four is going to be tough, without a doubt. However, the map is completely open so we can get a bunch of great TMs and items, so we definitely have a chance. I can also pick up my final encounter of the run, being a Growlithe from the Gather More Pokemon event. Growlithe also has Intimidate, which makes it an amazing encounter. With a Firestone, Aang reaches her final form and evolves into Arcanine, one of the best Pokemon in this challenge. Here is my final team leveled up to the final level cap of 60. It consists of Kai the Charizard, Monroe the Rapidash, Swampfire the Flareon, Torch the Magmar, and Heat Blast the Ninetales. as well as our newest member, Aang the Arcanine. Fortunately, the Johto and Hoenn Pokemon will not be making it on the final roster. They were invaluable and this run was literally quite impossible without them. Thank you for your service. With that, however, let's move on to the final 5 fights of the game. First in the Elite Four is Lorelei, who has 4 water types and a Jinx. This is by far one of the worst matchups in the Elite Four, but I'm not completely worried. Lorelei leads off with Dewgong and I with Monroe. We outspeed and set up the Sun via Sunny Day, as all Dewgong does is go for a Surf, which is nullified in the Sun. On the following turn, a Solar Beam decimates the Seal, which brings out Lorelei's next Pokemon, a Cloyster. Fortunately, this thing has paper thin defenses, so like Dewgong, he too goes down to a single Solar Beam. Third out is Lapras, and this is where things get a bit tricky. Unless we get a critical hit with Solar Beam, it never KOs, even with a Miracle Seed and a bunch of special attack EVs. A Solar Beam into Lapras does do great damage, and I'm expecting to tank a Surf to the face. However, Lorelei just goes for a Confuse Ray instead of going for Surf. I really expected a Surf to hit, but this is good because with the Citrus Berry, Lapras is out of healing range. I decide to risk the confusion, which luckily doesn't happen, and we KO the biggest threat of the fight with another Solar Beam. Wow. This brings in Slowbro, and unfortunately the sunlight fades. I need to risk the confusion again, but somehow we end up snapping out and go for Sunny Day to set the sun back up. I then take a Surf, however, doing massive damage and leaving me in the yellow HP range. It doesn't exactly matter because on the following turn, Solar Beam is more than enough for the KO despite this thing's special bulk. Last is Jinx, who is by far Lorelei's easiest Pokemon to deal with. We simply outspeed and KO with a sun boosted Flamethrower, winning me the battle and the first fight of the Gauntlet. Second in the Elite Four is Bruno, the fighting type expert. He leads with everyone's favorite fighting type Onix, and I with Torch. With enough special attack EV investment as well as a Hell Twisted Spoon, Torch is a phenomenal Pokemon into this fight. A Psychic on the first turn immediately picks off the Rock Sage, causing Bruno to send in his next Pokemon, being a Hitmonchan. It's the same thing here, we simply outspeed and destroy it with a singular Psychic. Third out is Machamp, who barely lives on a Psychic even in the red with the highest damage roll. Fortunately, Machamp just whiffs a Scary Face and a Citrus Berry pulls it out of healing range. This is phenomenal because on the following turn we can just go for another Psychic to get the KO. Fourth is the fighting type Pokemon Onix again, but like his brother we can just snag the KO with a singular Psychic. This leaves Bruno with his back against the wall and his final Pokemon a Hitmonlee. This just leaves Bruno with his final Pokemon being a Hitmonlee. Hitmonlee is pretty scary, but he just goes down to a Psychic, winning me the battle, and I didn't even take a tick of damage in the process. Third is the Ghost/Poison type trainer Agatha and her Ghost/Poison types. She leads off with her Gengar, and I with Torch. Gengar is a pretty scary Pokemon on paper, but we can just outspeed and pick him off with a singular Psychic before he even gets the chance to attack. Second is Golbat, who manages to outspeed but just goes for an Air Cutter for a bit of damage. It's not like it matters because like Gengar, a Psychic is enough for the KO. From there we can outspeed and KO Agatha's next 2 Pokemon with a Psychic apiece. And last is Haunter. Unfortunately we are all out of Psychic PP. This means I have to resort to Flamethrower. Despite it being neutral, it picks up the KO thanks to the earlier special attack EVs, winning me the battle, and I have to say Torch is putting in the work. For our easy Elite Four fights, and here as the 4th and final member in the Elite Four is Lance, who's going to be a lot trickier and a lot riskier. He has an insane team, and this battle isn't without risk. He leads off with Gyarados, and I with Heat Blast, who tanks the Intimidate. Gyarados is a pretty scary Pokemon, but he doesn't really have any water moves. However, thanks to the Intimidate, my HP Electric is nerfed. This means it only does about half, as Gyarados just goes for a Dragon Rage for a whopping 40 HP. This means on the following turn, another Hidden Power takes out Gyarados, bringing in an even bigger threat, Lance's Aerodactyl. When theory crafting for this fight, I realized how big of an issue this thing was. In order to beat this thing, we need 3 things to happen in this turn. Will-O-Wisp needs to connect, which would burn Aerodactyl and lowers attack, as well as Ancient Power not to crit or get the Omni Boost. An Omni Boost wouldn't be awful, but it's super hard to play around. Even if Heat Blast goes down to a critical hit Ancient Power, it's not the end of the world. We do have Torch with Flame Body to burn the Aerodactyl, but things get a lot harder to play into since the burn isn't guaranteed. The odds of all 3 things not happening are so low that it would never happen. Am I right? Like I predicted, Heat Blast lives in Ancient Power in the red and connects with a Will-O-Wisp to burn the Aerodactyl. At -3 attack, Aerodactyl is no longer a huge threat, however I do switch into Aang for an Intimidate to further drop this monster's attack. As you can see, Ancient Power only does a bit of damage, even though it's super effective. From here it's off to Swampfire, who gets tickled by an Ancient Power on the switch. Swampfire has Hidden Power Water, which is super effective into the Aerodactyl. This means that after tanking another ancient power, bringing Swamp Fire into the yellow, we can retaliate with a hidden power water for a ton of damage. It does not take Aerodactyl out directly, but the burn damage does do him in, causing Lance to send in his most powerful Pokemon, a Dragonite. Sadly, this is where Swamp Fire has to go down. I don't know what move this thing is going to go for, and I can't switch. Swamp Fire just really isn't that useful in the champion fight, and I really need to preserve my better Pokemon. With a heavy heart, I look at Swamp Fire one last time. And with that, a Hyper Beam destroys him, marking our first death of the run. Thank you so much for your service. You will be remembered. In his place, our starter Kai takes the field. On the recharge turn, we go for a Dragon Claw, which is super effective and does about a third. A Dragon Claw on the following turn brings the Behemoth deep in the red, as Hyper Beam does a ton of damage and would have KO'd with a critical hit. Fortunately, that doesn't happen, and we both heal up with our held Citrus Berries. The Citrus Berry, however, does not save Dragonite, who falls to a third Dragon Claw on the following turn. This takes care of one of the most powerful Pokemon in this gauntlet. Fourth is Dragonair, and thanks to the Citrus Berry, we have barely enough HP to dance with this thing. Dragon Claw is just shy of the KO, as Dragonair just goes for a Thunder Wave to paralyze Kai. I was really expecting him to attack here. Since we are low on HP and Lance is going to heal up, I switch into Aang for the Intimidate, as Lance predictably heals up. A priority Extreme Speed on the following turn does a ton of damage and even gets a critical hit for the KO, which is super nice. This just leaves Lance with his final Pokemon, a Dragonair. He is able to hang on from an Extreme Speed in the yellow HP range before he locks himself into Outrage. It doesn't matter because Extreme Speed is priority, so he can pick up the KO on the following turn, winning me the battle and the fight. Although not without a cost. Rest in peace, Swamp Fire. This brings me to the final fight in the game against the champion Water. He is a scary team with an Alakazam, Blastoise, and Rhyhorn being the scariest members on his team. Sure, his other three Pokemon aren't that terrifying, but his Blastoise has Hydro Pump and Rain Dance. This could easily sweep my entire team if I'm not lucky. He also no longer has the baby move Water Gun. Luckily, I have prepared a strategy here. It just dawned on me that this is the final fight in the game. If I don't do things correctly, we go all the way back to Brock. But I can't think about that. Let's do this. Water leads off with Pidgeot, and I with Heat Blast. The main goal is just to stall a little bit and try to set up with Monroe. I go for a quick attack for a bit of chip damage, as Sand Attack unfortunately lowers my accuracy. I then try to go for a Will-O-Wisp, but end up missing as Pidgeot nails me with another Sand Attack. Fortunately, we do connect with a Will-O-Wisp on the following turn, lowering Pidgeot's attack stat as he just goes for a third Sand Attack. Since there's honestly no point in staying in, I switch into Aang, who gets off an Intimidate to lower this thing's attack stat further. Pidgeot then goes for one of my personal favorite moves in Nuzlocke, a Feather Dance, which lowers my attack stat. Still, I do manage to nail him with a Confuse Ray to confuse him. With Pidgeot confused and his attack lowered, I can then switch into Monroe to set up my plan. We do get pretty lucky here, as Pidgeot just hurts itself in confusion instead of lowering my accuracy with Sand Attack. Thanks to the burn, Pidgeot is in healing range. This means I can set up the Sun completely for free, as Water just heals up Pidgeot, which is completely fine. From there, I can outspeed and pick off the bird with a Flamethrower, which boosted in the Sun is always a clean one-shot. Second is Rhydon, who is scary on paper if we didn't outspeed and just pick him off with a single Solar Beam. Solar Beam is seriously a phenomenal move in this playthrough. But then, this brings in Water's terrifying ace Blastoise with Rain Dance. I need to play this carefully. While we can outspeed and go for a Solar Beam doing a ton of damage, it leaves Blastoise in the red and doesn't get the KO. Blastoise then goes for Rain Dance, setting up the rain. This means that he can easily tear through my team with rain boosted Hydro Pumps. Blastoise also heals up with a Citrus Berry, which is once again great as it pulls him out of healing range. Fortunately, we can just outspeed and set up the Sun with a Sunny Day, meaning Hydro Pump's damage is reduced. Despite that, it does a ton of damage, and a critical hit would have just flat out killed. Fortunately, on the following turn, we can just then outspeed and go for a Solar Beam to KO Blastoise. Fourth is Alakazam, and despite his special bulk, he cannot survive a Flamethrower in the Sun. Fifth is Exeggutor, who is weak to fire moves. A Sun-boosted Flamethrower is always enough for the KO here. This just leaves Water's final Pokemon, an Arcanine, with the Sun up. Despite his being resisted to its Fire-type moves, this could still be an issue. And sadly, Monroe has to go down here. He is able to outspeed and go for a Sun-boosted Flamethrower, doing neutral damage in the Sun. Arcanine responds with a Flamethrower of its own, and Monroe holds with 7 HP. Close to victory, I just can't risk it. I don't think I have it within me to do another 170 attempts to get to this point again. Monroe has to go down. With a heavy heart, Monroe falls to Arcanine's extreme speed. Kai, my starter, comes in. He tanks an extreme speed which barely touches him, as I then misclick and go for Dragon Claw. I meant to go for Earthquake, and Dragon Claw only does a bit of damage to this thing. However, this does not matter in the slightest. because after taking the final extreme speed, leaving me with 90 HP, a final earthquake picks up the KO, winning me the battle and the entire run. This playthrough was the hardest Nuzlocke I have ever done. The early game was absolute hell. 170 attempts were insane, and I genuinely don't know what to say. Put that into context, it took Pokemon challenges to beat the hardest Pokemon games Run and Bun and Emerald Kaizo in fewer combined attempts. This took a ton of planning and took around a week and a half to beat. The amount of calcs and research I had to do was genuinely mind-boggling. Fire Red and Leaf Green just don't seem to be designed for the fire type at all. For whatever reason, I guess Game Freak just doesn't like the type. Before the end of the video, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Keeper Plays for his video. I've talked to him a little bit and he's honestly a super nice guy, and I totally recommend subscribing to him. His video and channel will be in the description down below. I would also like to give a shout out to Swoltaku, Zap Pokemon Challenges, and Hail Garchomp for their previous attempts with this challenge. I would also like to give a shout out to the Redditor who made the attempt on Reddit. I can't find their username at the moment, but if I do, I'll put it up on the screen. All of their YouTube channels will be down in the description below. Tell me what you thought about this video down in the comments and subscribe to the channel. You should also follow my Twitter or X depending on who you are, which is also linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Until next time, peace.